First off, everyone needs to listen to your podcast. I think you guys are probably my most favorite industry podcast out there because you guys really teach actors how to actually be entrepreneurs, how to actually market themselves. So I also do feel like every actor should think of themselves as a business person.
Hello, goblins and gooligans. It's me and only me. Just kidding. But Mike's not here today. So while you exactly, what if you just played as Mike, or we just pretended? Anyway,
I have the short blonde wig and those big ass glasses.
The short blonde wig. He just dyed his hair again. I like it blonde.
Yeah, I think it's a choice. You got to stand out in Brooklyn.
You got to stand out in Brooklyn and wear your pajamas.
Even though he lives in Queens, but
he hates Brooklyn.
That's insane.
He hates it. He thinks it, and especially Bushwick, he thinks it's too dirty.
Well, we're not going to offend all of the children listening, but yeah, he is correct about that.
I have to introduce our listeners to you before, so they're not too overly confused. So, friends, while Mike's not here, we do have Shayna. You are a very first guest co-host, very first, which is kind of appropriate. And we'll tee you up a little bit, and then we'll chat a bit about our own history and what we're going to do today. Even though I can already tell you and I could spend 2 hours just doing the whole podcast ourselves. So Shayna Blass is with us today, and she is a musician, producer, singer, and a true hyphenate artist living in Brooklyn, disgusting Brooklyn. She spends most of her time playing shows with her band and runs a podcast herself with the same name, Shay and the Good People. I've been to many of the concerts and they're great.
That's also not my band name, but I'm obsessed with this intro.
Okay, but okay.
It's very go. Sorry, go.
She has new episodes of her podcast, also the name of her band, Shay and the Good People, that come out every Wednesday. She has worked at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the Rep in St. Louis, Berkshire Theater Group, Theater J, Signature Theater in DC, the Kennedy Center, Arena Stage, where she played Seitel, which kind of looks like Seitel. That's what we were just saying before we hopped on. And the list goes on and on. She's also appeared on television in Broad City and Mr. Robot. And you can find her on Instagram at Shayna Blass. Is that where you can also find your band, Shay and the Good People?
So, and you can also find my band, Seitel and Mottel are in love.
Okay, that's a good name for a band.
So niche. Also,
I go to that music show.
Joshua's been to so many of my shows. I've had to say, please stop coming to my shows because I want other people to be in the seats. So Shay and the Good People was this I was hosting this singer-songwriter showcase at Pete's Candy Store in Williamsburg for about 2.5 years. I just kind of paused it at the end of the summer because I went to Flint to do a show, to do Godspell in the Pool, which if anyone listening or watching the pod is into musical theater and is online, might have seen the videos, maybe. I posted as many times a day as I could.
And paid the fuck off.
Yeah. And but I paused the live show, but I started the podcast to kind of complement the live show. So I had someone come and audio record the performance. So I host, I'll sing original music, and then I have 3 different singer-songwriters every single show. And I had an audio engineer record the show, and I would have the Good People come into the studio. I would interview them, and then I would cut in their live performance. But you know that because you listen to the podcast. And but I also, because it was monthly, I basically 2 to 3 weeks out of every month, I was promoting Shay and the Good People, Shay and the Good People, with pictures of me playing music and other people. I also perform with my band around the city. So it, whatever. If people are like, oh, your band Shane the Good People, at this point, I don't care. However you know me, however you see me on the internet, I'm like, as long as
I'm
it's
an audience slut. Just give me an audience.
Well, I was gonna say, as long as you like see me, it's positive, and you want to fuck me, like I think that's fine. But I did go through a band name Shay Fever. I thought that could be a good band name. But I play so often just a duo, I solo, full band that I'm just trying to stick. And I have most of my followers on Shayna Blass Instagram. So I just, you just try to make it easy for people. So now I'm just like, people are like, what's your band name? I'm like, Shayna Blass.
Also, I'm not going to say his name, but you keep ignoring my text about that hot guy that I'm like, why aren't you exploring that?
Wait, a straight man?
Well, I don't know. Okay, I'll say his name and then I'll have Mike bleep it out.
Okay.
Is that his name?
Who? No.
Yes, the black guy.
Oh,
I don't know. I'm like,
my guitar player?
Yes.
So my guitar player is very hot. He's available. He's single. If women out there want to slide in or come to me and I can set it up because I'll be the enta and I'm giving the schmata today for that.
Yes.
But we're not going to be together because we're working together. That's like if you and Mike like cross swords, like
we do.
That's how the podcast is so consistent because you guys just are like, we'll come over, have sex, and then we'll do the podcast.
That would be, oh my God.
No,
it's so much like stressful. That's such a stressful idea. There's so much that's stressing me out about that.
Yeah, but you guys talk too much. I think you wouldn't get to the doing doing. But no, I love him, but he's like my work wife. Like we are in a relationship, but it's creativity, and we also it's like
platonic.
Yeah, but it also is like a little bit different than that. It's more than that because we make music together, and when we talk about shows and when we talk about building a set, like sometimes we do get into conversations about like, well, we just played Club Coming the other night for Kat Cohen, who's an amazing, amazing comic, and I've been kind of on her shows, and we've been circling. I mean, she's way more famous than me, but she has a huge podcast. She just had a second special. She has a Netflix special, but I feel like I'm like the poor version of her, like the pauper version, but she's so gracious.
Version?
Yeah, she's like rich and like sexy.
Pauper, not like poppers.
Well, yeah.
I thought you read like poppers. I was like, what?
I'm like a gaping version of her. But JJ and I, we like talked about just 2 songs, but we really kind of we take it seriously what we do, and we're like, I was like, we got to do this song, and then we did Pink Pony Club, Chapel Roan, because we were closing the whole set. It was like all comic. She was performing, and then we were closing the whole set, which is terrifying because I'm sitting in. There's no green room. I'm just sitting behind the curtain, being like for 2 hours, being like, "Fuck, what are the lines?" Anyways, so he was like really pushing for like, we have to do an original because we're doing a cover. And we had like a really long, in-depth conversation about the vibe and like most people would be like, whatever. But we have that relationship where like he really cares about both of us up there. And I really care about both of us. He's not just like, to me, he's not just like a musician in the back. And then also like, he still lives with his mom. But
okay. He's a mama's boy.
I know. No, I love him. I'm like, come on, we got to find you an apartment. Let's go. Like,
well, this makes sense though, because you just ignored me every time I brought it up.
I mean, yeah, and I also blacked out anytime you brought it up. But I also am like, I need help. Like, some like recommend me to the men in your life. Like I already know the men that are already in my life. I'm like, I'm not going to date them. If I was going to date them, we would already be dating. So send me your single, straight, kind, somewhat I mean, I'm pretty ambitious, so I don't necessarily need ambition. Like both of us don't need to be like on the go all the time.
Right.
But
forward-footed.
Yeah, thoughtful. Someone who like, honestly, what's really important to me is someone who's just like really happy to be alive and grateful for the day and has like a positive outlook on life. I feel like I end up dating these men who just I think it's just a habit. I don't actually think they feel like this, but it's like the world is against them or things are so hard and like just kind of an Eeyore type vibe. And I wonder if that's because opposites attract in a way. And I wake up and I'm like, let's fucking go. I don't know how many days we have left. Let's do it. But I think those are the things I'm looking for. All the other things, I mean, I love a beard. I love like a little bit taller than me, maybe someone who makes more money, but those are kind of fun things that I will just discover. I don't think I need to, I'm not like type A about it. I just want to feel seen, heard, celebrated, and supported. I think those are the most important things.
I love it, but I also love like how like this became like a very specific, like I'm looking kind of like 5'9" to 6'2". Ideally a beard, a piercing in the right ear would be fabulous.
I'm not to be pussy.
Exactly. Like it really became like this is the modern day relationship column. What was that thing when people would write in and be like, wait, what they when they'd say, oh, personals. Yeah. Seeking.
Totally. I mean,
that's a good idea for a podcast.
I mean, there are I listen to so many relationship podcasts, and it also, I can imagine this seems like so confusing to gay people and gay men who are like, what do you like? There's just different worlds in terms of like, not necessarily monogamy, but like the looking and the seeking. I know that's universal for like any orientation and any gender, but I do feel very envious of like gay men and the like just the flow, I think, of relationships more, and also like
that's a good way to put it.
I'm gonna the flow, like I don't know, it just feels a lot more high stakes in the hetero world, at least to women.
I know what you mean by that.
You don't have a womb, you don't have like a time clock, and you don't have to worry about getting pregnant. And also I think cheating is like very silly to potentially a lot of gay men, where they're like, wait, what? No, it's just like you could just have partners, like it's fine. Where there's like cheating in a hetero relationship like ends it.
Yeah. No, I do hear that. Speaking of gay, let's talk about why we're here today. So
that's great.
Shayna's co-hosting this episode in large part because our guest today, Michael Kooman, a wonderful composer, is someone whom we both recently sort of briefly collaborated with, and then Shayna went on to sort of seemingly explore more potentially. Michael Kooman, for those of you who know him from my early years of when I was first introduced to his work, of Kooman and Dimond, of Chris Dimond and Michael Kooman. Michael Kooman is an Emmy-nominated composer for the stage and screen. His most recent musical, Finn, premiered at the Kennedy Center to rave reviews. Also, just so you know, I usually try to cut down bios, and like this one, like I actually have kept the large portion of, because huge. He wrote more than 150 songs for Vampirina. Is that how you say that title of that television show? Vampirina. Yep. Really prepared. No, I'm just kidding. I just don't really
Vampirina?
Is it Vampirina?
No, I think it's Vampirina.
Okay. He wrote more than 150 songs for Vampirina, an animated musical TV series that airs on the Disney Channel and Disney Junior. Didn't know there was different ones. Reaching over 100 million viewers in 115 countries. He's written over 400 songs for other TV shows, including Ridley Jones, Dead End Paranormal Park, and Spirit Rangers. He's written songs for Patti LuPone, Audra McDonald, Sutton Foster, Brian Stokes Mitchell, Patina Miller, Sarah Ramirez, Christian Borle, Andrew Reynolds, Santino Fontana, Christopher Jackson, Skylar Aston. Oh yeah, Skylar Aston. James Monroe Egelhart, Anna Campo, she went to my school. Jane Lynch, Henry Winkler, Rachel Bloom, Donald Faison, Alfred Molina, Taryn Killam, who I didn't know who that was. And then all of a sudden they came on the scene. And Wanda Sykes. His other stage projects include Romantics Anonymous at Shakespeare's Globe, The Noteworthy Life of Howard Barnes, Orphy and the Book of Heroes, The Enlightenment of Percival von Schmutz, Judge Jackie, Disorder in the Court, Danny Girl, Golden Gate, Homemade Fusion, and Junior Claus. And he's gotten some awards, including the Fred Ebb Award, a Jonathan Larson Grant, the Mary Rogers Lorenz Hart Award, the Samuel French Next Step Award, and the Burton Lane Award. And he's a graduate of the BMI Workshop and Carnegie Mellon University.
Oh my God.
It's a lot.
He's a working girl.
He's a working girl, and we're gonna be chatting with him in just a moment and sharing some insight into his world as a composer and who's done so much.
Did I tell you how I originally met Michael?
Oh wait, you knew him before
Kooman
we met?
and Dimond? Yeah. So
I didn't know that.
Right when I graduated college, I went to American University. Yeah. I was understudy for Lauren Imani Dupree in the first book, Orphy and the Book of Heroes.
Who's that name?
Lauren?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she was a DC actor, and then she moved to Seattle. But she was the lead. She was Orphy, and me and my friend Nora Palka understudied Orphy in the Book of Heroes. Nora understudied Gia Mora.
I remember Gia.
Yeah, and also
I still get her emails.
Yeah, me too. And like Sam Edgerly was in it, Evan Casey, and
I
Paul
vaguely
Scanlon.
remember this. I was there when this was happening.
Yes, yeah. Because I had just graduated, and you and I met.
Oh, sure.
My senior, we just we had like kind of probably just met like a year or two before, but that was like my first Kennedy Center gig, and Kooman and Dimond were in the room, but I never went on. I was just kind of hanging out in the back. I don't even think I ever learned the part because I was like, oh, Lauren's gonna do it, and I was just like, I was just kind of like lazy and a drunk at that point, but I was young. I was like 22 or whatever, and I remember Nora and I was living with Nora, who was the other understudy, and we drove into Kennedy Center one day, and we got in a huge fight because she didn't pick up honey for me at the store. We still talk about that. But 10 years later, when this spring, when you, me, Kooman and Dimond did this workshop, I'm like, that's it. Those are the only people who did it. When we did this workshop of The Break, right before we got to Flint, Chris Dimond, and I hadn't seen these guys in 10 years. Chris sent me a Facebook message. He was like, oh my God, I just got the email. Are you going to be doing this workshop? And I said, yes. Oh my God, I can't believe you remember me. So it was a really cool full circle, and to like finally actually work with them. You don't think when you're like an understudy, the composer and the writer remember you.
Of course. But they did.
Yeah, they did. I mean,
they did. They loved you. And Shayna was great in the workshop of The Break. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, maybe we will.
So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen and others, Michael Kooman. When Michael Luberis, who runs Flint Repertory, which is what sort of brought the three of us together, which is why I wanted Shayna specifically to co-host this episode, he was like, listen, do you know Kooman and Dimond? I said, of course I know Kooman and Dimond.
Yeah.
Because back to 20 years ago, when we have to be under the exact same age, Michael, but we're 26. You're 26, right?
26 and a half.
There you go.
And I'm 12.
But I remember, you and Chris, from my perspective, have always written what I'll call zeitgeisty material. It was, material that sort of permeates niche, specifically theater culture. So specifically this song In Excess, which was really going around, getting around town. And that was, I remember Sam Edgerly, Shayna, specifically, I coached him on that song many a time. So anyway, when Lou Barris was like, do you know Kooman and Dimond? I was like, of course, would love to come play. But let's go back to the beginning. I always like to hear about the early
musical
stages.
segue.
Exactly. Will you write our segues for this episode?
Of course.
We could
Give
pay
me a
you
couple
lot.
minutes.
Yeah.
Where did it all begin, Michael? What was your earliest entry point into the industry, and was composing always the goal?
I started out when I was young wanting to be a director of film, but that I never really did anything to follow that. I just was always attracted to music. Just to go back a little bit further, my grandmother passed and I inherited her upright piano, and I sort of fell in love with it immediately. And I was just sort of playing songs from the radio. I sort of learned by ear at first. And that's sort of how I found my way into music. I knew I wanted to go into music as a composer. I went to Carnegie Mellon as a composer. I met Chris Dimond in a course called Libretto, which was actually a lyric writing course, even though it was titled Libretto. And Chris's lyrics were so dirty and funny and heartfelt and sincere. And I was like, I want to work with this guy. I asked him if he wanted to sort of write some songs together for this senior, what's that called? Showcase.
Yep.
They were doing a showcase thing, and someone had asked me to write a couple songs because at that moment I was writing music and lyrics. And I asked him to work on some songs together, one of which was a song called Random Black Girl, which we got to work on with Patina Miller, who was one of our favorite collaborators ever. But we just sort of wrote these. It was a good way of starting to test out how I was working with somebody, writing these sort of self-contained cabaret songs that you're talking about. And then after Chris and I both moved to the city around the same time. I was playing ballet classes at Alvin Ailey to make a living, and we continued writing songs. We got an invite to do a show at the Kennedy Center, and actually a Millennium Stage. I don't know if you've heard of that. They do a concert. Actually, Shayna, you know more about that than I do.
Yeah,
probably.
I've done those. Yeah.
And that was when we were like, okay, what else do we need to fill in to make a concert? What kind of material do we need? And so I forget how we wrote To Excess, but Chris has a real friend who, gosh, this is such a weird story, but his friend collects beer bottles. This is, you can cut this from the podcast if you want, but this is the true story that I don't think anyone has ever heard about the song To Excess.
Okay.
Chris has a friend that collects beer bottles, and he's always searching on Craigslist for beer bottles or rare beer bottles. And he had there was this post that was selling 5,000 beer bottles, but you must come and get them yourself. And the price was super duper low. And this guy, Chris's friend, was like, oh, I'm definitely going to do this. So he drives to pick up these beer bottles, and he goes to the address, and there's this caution tape around the address. And he goes to the neighbor, and he's like, I'm supposed to pick up these beer bottles. I think this is the address right here. Do you know anything about that? And she's like, I don't want to talk about it. So he is texting the guy, and the guy's like, you got, go beyond the caution tape and come in to pick up the beer bottles. And this is true. This is really nuts.
This sounds like a hookup from my 20s.
I know. We've all been to this. We're all you're like, should we do the caution tape? Yes, I will.
Exactly.
I'm horny. But anyway, it turns out that this house was being sold, and it was condemned because an actual human had captured a person, and this woman was living locked in his basement for a year, and she somehow got out. And then they alerted the authorities. He got caught, and his estate was selling everything he owned, and he collected beer bottles. And so basically the song To Excess is sort of inspired by the experience of this dude who was living a double life, had someone in his basement, and was living a life. Anyway, I know that's kind of sadistic. Maybe that's too dark for this podcast, and maybe that's a weird story, but that. Anyway, you asked about that song. We sort of wrote it for the Millennium Stage, and we sort of called upon this really absolutely insane story.
Wow. That's wild.
Well, Shayna, when we were talking about Michael the other day, I mean, I have a very dark sense of humor. Like
Same.
naturally. Exactly. And and so it kind of tracks that also for me why even all those years ago, when did that song wasn't 20 years ago. When did that song come out?
That song was like 2008.
Okay. So nearly,
Nearly.
nearly, but that's exactly my sense of humor. Like that's 100%. Like go more extreme, please. Actually, I watched Serial Mom for the first time last night.
Ooh.
Actually,
What?
Michael, I was thinking, Serial Mom, John Waters, Shayna, with
Yeah.
Don't.
Oh, I
know
don't
that.
know it, but is it it's
Michael.
a movie?
It's a John Waters movie. Kathleen Turner. It's like this mom who like loses her mind and sadistically starts like killing people in her life. It's really funny, and that would be a really good musical. And Michael, you should watch it. I bet you and John Waters would really hit it off. Something just tells me.
I would love. That sounds like up my alley. What's that other John Waters movie where that woman is prank calling and using all these swear words?
That's Serial Mom.
The clips of that keep coming up, and I'm like, whatever this is, I want to like.
That's Serial Mom.
I swear to God, I'm like, this should be a musical. This is hella funny.
Michael.
Wow.
Okay, we're gonna have
Planted
a
the
developmental
seed.
session next week. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I've already done the raise. No, I really think that and the Flintstones would be like two amazing musicals. Just to say,
that's a good idea. Yeah.
The John Goodman,
Yeah.
Rosie O'Donnell. I mean, just the structure of that alone.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So
I feel
okay.
like, is there going to be a Gypsy Rose musical? You could also do that.
Oh, interesting. There's been a series and a film.
Yeah.
And now the real life. Yeah, but how? I mean, interesting. But like, but like, I hear like the score of like, what was that Adam Gettle piece that had the most interesting score? Not Guns N' Roses.
Is it the
Days
one
of
about
Wine and Roses?
Days of Wine and Roses. That's like what I would picture in my head a little bit, to be honest with you.
For Serial Mom?
No, for the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
Oh,
Oh,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're right. That would be an incredible. I mean, I am gobsmacked by that story. That story is outrageous.
Insane. Now you have this big poster behind you, and we were arguing before. Is it Vampirina or Vampirina?
It's Vampirina. It's a show. It was actually the show that got me into TV. So, this we all know, and everyone who is listening knows this is a business of like relationships. And Chris and I had a show at NAMT, the National Alliance for Musical Theater. It's this amazing organization. They do like 8 new musicals. They do a 45-minute cut, and it's a real like meeting of people who are interested in writing and producing new musicals. We did a reading of a show called The Noteworthy Life of Howard Barnes, which is sort of a concept that has now been used many times in many different mediums. But the concept 10 years ago that we came up with was a guy wakes up and his life has become a musical and he hates musicals and he's on a quest to get out. But we did this reading at NAMT, and someone who came was Jay Stutler, who is the head of music for animated series at Disney. And he was like, you guys should really audition for some of our animated shows sometime. And I was like, yeah, sure. So basically the audition thing is sort of something like they send you this song brief and they're like, we are looking for songwriters for this show. And we think the sound is sort of like this. And here is, sometimes they'll give you like a whole episode, but mostly it's like, in the first episode, she sings about how nervous she is to be at school for the first time or something like that. And, sort of the influences that the writers have in mind. And you sort of just have to write and create and produce a track in like 2 weeks. But that's how we got Vampirina. Like we auditioned for like 3 or 4 and didn't get them. And then we got this one Vampirina, and it sort of changed our lives. Chris and I, that is. And we ended up writing 150 vampire-related songs for this show. And it was crazy. I mean, like Patti LuPone was the grandmother on the show, so I got to write like 6 songs for Patti LuPone. Brian Stokes Mitchell was the grandfather. Wanda Sykes was one of the side characters. I wrote a song for Wanda Sykes. And it, it sort of like pushed me into a different realm, because also in that regard, you know, TV is very different from theater in the sense that like you have to sort of hand over the final product. You in theater, I could just be like, okay, orchestrator, do this, music director, like make sure they sound good, but like you have to do kind of all of that on TV. I'm sorry, I'm like telling a lot of stories here. I hope it's
No, yeah, love
interesting.
This
it.
is
Love
helpful
it.
because
Okay.
I really don't. That was a question that we had of like, how do you balance those TV projects? I mean, writing for TV is just so different, and I think there's probably a lot of people who write for musical theater listening to this and are like, I'd like to do TV music, but I don't even know how that works. So it's really helpful for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I would say the biggest thing for writers that is different on the TV film side is that you really have to become a music producer. It's like you can't just write piano vocal and hand it over to someone else. You have to like seriously involve yourself with the process of working in recorded music. And for us, what that meant is just specifically, we got like a big chunk of money each episode, and we had to within that money sort of dole out how much we were going to pay ourselves. We had to pay demo vocalists. I had two orchestrators that I would, you know, depending on the week, I would give one to the other. We have to pay audio engineers. We had to rent studios. So like it became a whole other entity of an enterprise with TV, which is, you know, the first 6 months were like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Every day I was like, I'm gonna get fired. I don't know what I'm doing. Truly, I'm sure we all feel that, right? Like,
Imposter syndrome of all
yeah,
kinds.
it's
Sure,
so
of course.
real. That's so helpful to hear. Like that. It's.
Did you have a preference creatively between the two,
well,
stage or film?
so the big difference between film and TV from a writer's perspective is, you know, I'm a hired gun for all of these songs that I'm writing, and so they're not my characters. They're not even my storylines. I don't even choose the placement within the episode for these things. Like they come to they send the episode the script, and it's like she sings a song on this page, and it's sort of like outlined for you whether that's a great place for a song or sometimes it's not. The job is to write the best song possible for that thing, which can be freeing in some way because it's like, okay, well, I didn't choose this thing, but I got to write a bop that's going to hit kids in this moment. You know, in theater, you have a lot more agency or ownership over the work, but the price point is so much lower, and it's generally difficult to like make a living. But there's different skills that like I would say that my theater skills really helped me, and then also coming back to theater after doing a bunch of television really helped me too, because you're just writing so much so quickly. We had to do 2 songs a week.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, it kind of takes me to actually your relationship or collaboration with Chris, because just in a more macro sense, because I actually do want to talk about some of your niche theater stuff as opposed to some of the more commercial television stuff. Because to your point about we all know we've all worked in the theater, we've all been poor, you know, subsequently. But that really seems to be like your creative interests and niches seem to be really kind of specific, and even when we were actually working on the break, we might have briefly had that conversation in some ways about even like a moment in time, so to speak. But let's talk about Chris Dimond. So you guys met at CMU, and that's fascinating that there was a musical theater writing class of some kind. That's great. What makes your collaboration thrive? Because you guys do seem fairly different. And how do you navigate creative disagreements?
Yeah, I mean, it is now almost a 20-year relationship, so it is like a relationship that has its ups and downs and is wonderful and difficult at the same time, and all of those things. I think what makes us work well is we do have a certain we have a similarity in the way that we sort of like approach theater and approach writing. But we also, I think, have a little bit of a yin yang experience in the sense that I find that I'm a little bit more of an up of a human, and he's a little bit more like just sort of like neurotic. He's an observer, you know. He is really observant. He's very smart, I think music and lyrics, music is more feeling, music is more like emotional, and lyric is the more sort of concrete aspect of writing. And he has that observant ability. We sort of balance each other out a little bit, I think, in certain ways. How do we manage difficulties? I mean, it's just, gosh, you know what? I saw this couple being interviewed on one of those. Okay, we're all like obsessed. We're all like robots to the Instagram machine or TikTok, whatever you're on right now. A couple's being interviewed, and they were like, "What's your key to being together for 40 years?" And they said, "Lean into the discomfort and don't shy away from it, and don't avoid it." And I think that's probably what we do. We just talk about it, and like, it's all about compromise, right? It's like, okay, if I see this is really important to you, I'm going to give it to you. Like, if I don't have a strong opinion about it, just let's do your way. Like, if we really have a difficult disagreement, it's that third way usually. Like, what's not my way, not your way, but what's this other way that we both can get really excited about? That's generally how we do it. How do you all do it?
Well, yeah, go ahead, Shane.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of the robot and Instagram and TikTok, do you know like the black cat and golden retriever theory?
No, tell me.
It's just like the perfect match of like the black cat energy, and usually that's like the dark emo kind of like dark feminine energy. It doesn't even have to be like, I think yin and yang is better in this situation. Yeah. And then the golden retriever is like the yang energy, and like it has more energy and is like jumping around when like the black cat is like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like when I think of you two as a perfect match, it's like, oh yeah, that theory rings true.
Totally.
From TikTok.
Yeah. Thank you, TikTok, for teaching us about ourselves.
Well, I always talk about creative relationships are so intimate.
Yeah.
You bringing up the video of that couple, is such a good example, because I think we forget about it. It's easy to be like, oh, I'm excited about this idea at the beginning of whatever a creative relationship is. And then it really tests your ability to communicate, navigate through disagreements, like you're saying, compromise as necessary. Oh, this is really important to my partner, whatever sense that is, and how you give and take, speaks to probably the longevity, the ability to create a longevity in a career. And you and Chris obviously have been able to do that. So you sort of said it, but is there any specific advice you would give to someone who might be in the midst of a tenuous creative relationship and is feeling like at a bit of an impasse?
Mm-hmm. I think really speaking from the heart and speaking from an emotional place, I try to think about what I can do better and offer that first, and just be like, look, I know that like, for example, something I'm working on just personally, I tend to shoot down ideas a little bit too much. Like, and I think I know that is something I need to work on. And Chris has talked to me about it. He's like, I think you shoot my ideas down too much. I'm like, okay, I think you're right. And so if I have difficulty, I'm like, look, I know I'm shooting some ideas down here, but what I'm trying to get at is something that I think the audience we're writing for is going to really hit on. So you know what I mean? I'm trying to leave. Sometimes it's just communication, right? Like,
yeah, I was going to say that.
Go ahead. Sorry. What was that?
No, I was just going to say awareness and communication. Yeah. It's so simple, but hard.
And I think something that is really important is it's hard to tell when you first meet somebody, but like theater, especially, I think you got to think about someone that you're willing to be in the trenches with. Like, theater is tough. And especially writing a new musical or being in a new musical, like the difficulty is high to get things right. And people that have strong opinions are going to disagree. And things get tenuous, especially in like tech, when it's like, okay, we really have to decide now how we're going to spend our time and how we're going to edit this stuff. So sometimes I think about that, like especially when I'm meeting a new collaborator, like Chris and I, obviously we know each other so well, but like if I'm meeting someone new, I sometimes go, do I think this person's going to be a good person to work with when it's really tough and when things are going to get tough, because it's going to get tough. And musicals take years to come to fruition. So know that it's going to be tough. Think about how, here's something that Chris and I started doing recently that is so awesome. And mainly for Chris and I have this weird, like, I'm like the Chris Dimond whisperer right now, and he's the Michael Kooman whisperer. So we don't have to like, it's like so weird that we just know each other so well. Like, but with other people, when we're working with other people on things, we try to have a conversation at the beginning. What are we going to do when we disagree? We start from the beginning. We're going to, like, how do we want to talk about things when we disagree, and how are we going to get through it, and do it even before it starts? Because it's something we know is going to happen. And even being like, I just finished this thing at the Kennedy Center. We said, how do you like to receive feedback? All of us went around and we sort of said, this kind of makes me frustrated when I have to do this. But I'm better in the morning or something. You know what I mean? Like our director really wanted to receive feedback like fresh in the morning and not after like 10 hours of tech, which I totally understand. But that was a really great thing to know, you know, so things like that, just trying to troubleshoot before the trouble starts.
I love that.
Well, and we were sort of, you know, I've known Shayna for a long time, and and even Shayna, I'm just going to come back to what you just said, Michael, but when you talk about like, 2014, I was kind of a mess, but like, I was also fun. What's my point? Especially in the theater, people want to work with nice people who are talented and hardworking. And again, I'm relating this back to what you even checking in with, like, how do you like to receive feedback? Because there is a whole other element to this that, given the fact that this is such a relationship driven business, you really want to be thinking about and considering, how am I collaborating with other people in a way that makes them want to bring me back? I have a lot of self-reflection on this myself, because I don't view myself as a difficult person, but I will 100% say I'm high maintenance. I'm just a high maintenance person.
Yeah.
Like in my life, I really am. And it's something I have to really check, because we know, like, in the theater, there aren't many resources.
No snacks.
So no kombuchas on tap. Yeah. I joke, but some of my friends in corporate America, they're like, "Oh no, we have like a kombucha fridge." I'm like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen."
No, we don't have cold brew on tap. No.
Actually, it's the fridge is on the TKTS booth. You just have to open it up, and there's a bunch of kombucha that you didn't know that, but now you do.
Yeah, you have to go to Times Square.
Yeah.
As you go buy your 50% off tickets.
Yeah.
No, but the really, so it's like for this, and Mike can tell you this, Labadia, who co-hosts this podcast with me. I personally am more interested in the collaboration and keeping that sacred and alive than I am about whatever we are making. I don't know if that's true for either of you, but for me, I would rather, because you and Chris, actually, just taking you and Chris, like, that's the nucleus. That's the magic. And that can't ever go, even if a line changes or a song changes. I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I want to just also jump in and validate, or like, I'm just in awe that you guys, not in awe, but I just think it's fucking amazing that you as collaborators are able to have those conversations, but that can be translated to every type of relationship, like romantic relationships, or relationship with your siblings or your parents, of that communication of like, I mean, I wish my parents had that conversation of like, how are we going to have a disagreement, instead of just screaming at each other in front of my sister and I our entire childhood, and then they got divorced. You know, it's just like, I mean, that's their journey, but I feel like we underestimate, we don't use, or not we, but I don't hear those same type of skills, communication skills. Nonviolent Communication is a great book on how to communicate your feelings or your point, or to how to have an actual conversation that does not have violence, not like domestic violence, but like word violence. that makes a huge difference of like, let's handle what we want to handle. Let's figure out how we're going to handle these things before that happens, so we don't blow up in front of a rehearsal room, or just like, it's just not efficient,
Yeah.
so that
It's not efficient. It's also like not professional to blow up these days, right? Like you can't,
right.
you just can't do it. And so,
Not like the good old days.
not the good old days when you could flip a table and storm
Damn.
out.
Yeah.
But it's also like, our what we do is so unbelievably collaborative. And also, we're all emotional creatures that are getting into this industry, usually, especially musical theater. Musical theater is very emotion driven, right? So you're going to have strong emotions. And we're not leading the Salesforce team or like the Google team of this, where there's like okay, we need to hit this goal here. The goal is to create a good show, but there's also a lot of emotional protection that I think you need to wrap into the whole experience as well, because we're all being vulnerable. every every single one of us, making an acting choice in front of a room full of people is very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Just taking a strong opinion on anything that you're doing is a very vulnerable thing. So sometimes, the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? It's like, oh, okay. I mean, the cool thing about theater that is not existing in TV, at least that I'm aware of at the moment, is that you're not sitting in a room just not like just figuring things out for a while. You kind of it's like, okay, say the line this way, great, okay, no, actually we want another take that's like this. Whereas we just did this thing at the Kennedy Center. It's like we have a couple weeks to be like, okay, in my head I'm like, I don't like how this is going, this like the staging or the acting in this thing, but I'm just gonna let him sit with it, and maybe they're gonna figure it out. And if it doesn't work in a week, I'm gonna say something. Do you know what I mean? There's a time we have to allow people to figure it out, as opposed to you got to hit your mark right now.
Yeah.
How open are you genuinely to your other collaborators' feedback, like the musical director or actors or choreographer? Like, when, like, do you really take that in? Or at this point, you and Chris know each other so well and your process so well that you might respectfully take it in, but really just come back to home base?
I take everybody's opinion to heart. I mean, like it's just like, I mean, specifically my music team, I think of them as my first line of defense in a bad musical decision. You know what I mean? I don't know. We all are doing what we think is the right thing, right? But there's been a couple times when someone has been like, actually, here's an interesting idea. Like, I just did this show at the Kennedy Center, and there's this music director. His name is Nathan. He's so wonderful, and he's like this Sondheim nerd, and he like knows everything about Sondheim and like how he did like the themes in each show, how they were incorporated into underscoring. I'm just like writing the underscoring for this show, like in the room, usually every day as we're sort of doing it. And then there's a point where like we go back and we're like, okay, with these other scenes need underscoring. And I was like, what should we do here? And he was like, did you ever think about like maybe taking your one melody and doing it with the accompaniment figure of another song? And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I had never really done that before, but he was sort of taking this idea that he had sort of taken from Sondheim because he knows him so much better. And I was like, that is brilliant. And I started doing that as a way of trying to like meld ideas. And that was such a great piece of feedback. And I was like, Nathan, that was brilliant. That was so awesome. We just got to like so this is just sort of like a larger conversation that
Yeah.
I'll just a larger chunk of uh, an opinion that I have that I think I'd love to just share that is related to this conversation. I think the two biggest roadblocks to growth are ego or blind spots. And so if we are not usually aware of our blind spots, right? If someone's going, hey, actually, you could make this underscoring a little bit more rich if you do this. I mean, that is a piece of feedback, right? And you can either be like, oh my gosh, I didn't think of that. That's amazing. or you can be like, no, I know how to underscore my show. I don't want that. Like I'm better. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it's like you either don't. Does that make sense? Like ego or blind spots
Totally.
being the biggest roadblock to growth.
Yeah, it's like entitlement and the refusal to collaborate.
Yeah.
It's like, well, then why are you here?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I agree. And
like ego can be a beautiful thing. Meaning, like I am a big like there's a healthy ego and there's an unhelpful ego.
Yeah.
And it's that balance, right? Of like, having an ego that helps you and then the ego that works against you, because going back to that imposter syndrome idea, what flares up? Well, if I accept this person's concept or conceit, does it somehow make me less than, in, I would argue, other people's eyes in some ways, as opposed to like, oh no, that might actually be a good idea that could support. So you're kind of hitting on something that actually I don't really love talking about, like evolution of quote unquote sounds, but Michael, I'm just curious for you. Do you feel like over the years, like your sound, quote unquote, as a composer has evolved at all? And if so, what does that even mean? What does my stupid question even mean?
It's not a stupid question. I think it's a great question.
Thank you.
I don't know that yes, I would hope sound evolves. Like, I think the beautiful thing about doing this for a living or doing this industry is there's a never ending amount of things to learn, right? Like, and I think sound wise, I don't know if I have a sound, but I know that I think my approach has been refined to choosing the sounds that I'm using in a show. I mean, the cool thing about writing music theater is that, like, okay, The Break, which we all worked on, is like rock. I'm trying to like hit that. Where does like if I wanted to write a rock concert of songs, where does my sort of sensibility fit in with that conceit of rock? Finn is like musical theater with a capital M and a capital T. Like, I was just like, okay, this is going to be musical theater. Whereas, the approach was quite different in The Break, where I'm just trying to sort of write in a way that maybe isn't sort of contained within the musical theater circle, if that makes sense. I don't know if my sound has changed. I mean, yes, it has. But I think I'm just thinking about music differently. I put a lot more thought into what I do. I put a lot more research into the songs and sounds that I'm using before I really try to write, because I sort of just want to respect the actors. I want to respect the audience. I don't want to waste their time. If I'm going to do something, I want it to be really good. And so the way that affects, I don't know how that affects my sound. It just affects the way I approach something. I think sound less so than focus, preparation, effort, rewriting. That's how I've developed. I think I've gotten better at those things. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. And I'll piggyback off of that, of like having sung your music. Like we did The Break together, that workshop, and it was so much fun. And I'm curious, what's your favorite thing about working with me? I'm just kidding. But
your voice is incredible. Your voice is incredible, and I could write a million songs for it. I think your voice is so good. Like, you sang it so well, and everyone who heard you do it was like, Shayna, oh my gosh. Like, and you just brought this wonderful energy to the room, and you have a facility to your voice that not many people have, for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't want to make it about me. That was uncomfortable.
Let's make it about you.
But also, yes, we are going to write more songs together. But I was going to say, specifically off of the writing, like, it was just two of us in the show, and we both, me and the other character, we sang the whole time. But at the same time, my voice never got tired with the music that you were writing. And we kind of touched on that briefly. Like, I talked to you about some other musical theater songs that I did that I was like, oh my God, it's so, like, I can do it, but it feels so hot. Like, I feel like I can only sing the song once. But I felt like The Break, I was like, oh, I could probably do this 8 times a week. if need be. How do you approach writing in that way? Like writing for musical theater actors, like sustainability and stamina?
Well, thank you. That is such an amazing compliment. I really appreciate it because I do think about what it's like to sing. You know, like my stuff, I don't write for vocal pyrotechnics. You know, I write for story, and that really it always comes back to the story. And I think it's rare in a score when the music is just going to be there to show off. Like, I think you could get a couple moments in a show where it's truly about just music because we blossomed into this emotional place and we can take it to another level in a purely musical way. But I think it's mostly about storytelling. And if it's about storytelling, then you're not going to be belting your face off the whole time. It's you know, a story has an arc, a character has an arc. And also, just as I've continued to write musicals, I think about the practicality of singing, of what an actor is going to be doing. Just like we have to think the practicality of a scene change. How long is that going to take? You know, we got to work on the music that transitions us. I was in a. It's just practicality. Theater has to work. You have to make it work. You have to think about how it's going to be done. And the more you do this industry, the more you figure out how it's going to be done. And I want these shows to be done. So I'm not going to write the craziest thing ever. I mean, it's also not an easy score. You're making it sound like you sang it so well, and you're also a songwriter yourself. So I think you have a ability to get in there and just sort of like understand a song from a different level that most actors, I think, takes them a little bit longer. I mean, you did such a great job. Thank you. And Joshua was a fantastic director.
Oh, so
funny.
fun.
I mean, so brilliant.
Yeah, the sense of humor really matched. So we're going to be on Broadway 2025.
Yes. Look out.
In preparing for this, talking to you today, just to dovetail off of it, you've talked quite a bit about story and collaboration in the past and its importance in crafting musicals. And so while this might be a seemingly leading question, it's not meant to be. When you look at
you can lead me on.
Okay, babe. And when you look at new composers today, what's a common mistake that you see?
And showing off. Go ahead. Sorry, you didn't realize there was more.
No, that's it. You feel like it kind of speaks to what you're saying. Like it's like, oh, look at me, look at my writing or my music or whatever the hell is. What is it more specifically?
Well, I think it's just a young person thing. If you think about it, young people are still trying to find their identity, even in their 20s. It's like, oh, I'm amazing. I need to show off what I'm amazing. I need to hide the things that I'm not good at. And so I find that sometimes young composers will, really like it whatever they unconsciously are good at, they're trying to really ramp up. Whether it's like writing a big American Idol riff of a song where there's just so many like high notes with belty things, or is it like there's a composer I know really well who is just obsessed with like crazy harmonic shifts and weird accompaniment figures, right? It can be a way to show off. There's so many ways to show off, but really the beauty and simplicity of a well-written song lies often in its simplicity. There's a sort of an unexpected simplicity to things. Sometimes I think of it, I try to explain I teach songwriting on Wednesday nights to high schoolers. Shane is coming this Wednesday to do this amazing unit that we're doing where we're going to write a song for all these different singers' voices specifically, because we're trying to look at how to write for a voice. I've sort of lost my train of thought. Oh, here's what I say to my students is like, when you're writing for theater, it's a pie chart. Sometimes you can think of it as a pie chart, and music and lyrics are just a sliver of the way that is being told, and you need to leave space for choreo, setting, set, costume, staging. It's like if you're writing something that is everything, if it is really, really complicated or really, really like, look at me, it doesn't leave space for those other elements to live and breathe. There is a power in sort of underwriting and allowing space even for the actor to add their own sort of like spin on things because they have to act it. You know, if you're locking them too much into a certain thing, or they're constantly going up to the highest note in their range, is that really telling the story? Or are you wanting me to like be like, wow, oh my god, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
if you're really putting the story and the character first, that dictates a lot of the decisions for you. And how does a really well written song fit into the story, or how does a really well written song tell the story more? Understanding the mechanics of both storytelling, but also how the human voice works. Does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yeah,
What do you
that's
think
like
about that, Shayna?
that's like the holistic approach to writing a musical. Truly, like I just the fact, I mean, maybe most musical theater writers think about this, but I don't feel like I've heard that before, of like a pie chart, a sliver, and also the costumes and the set. Like just the fact that like your intention is to include all of those things when you're writing a musical, I think makes a huge difference.
Yeah, no, it's a unique, I had never think about that, making space for the other elements to live up to their fullest potential as well, as opposed to overcomplicating, which could actually dampen their ability to do what they do best, is kind of what I hear you saying.
Exactly.
Very considerate. Okay, how do you, Michael, define success in your own career? And what would you say to those who are trying to sustain themselves on their own journey of making a creative career happen?
I think you have to define your own version of success. I
Mm-hmm.
think success for me is working. I don't need an award or an acknowledgement. You have to kind of love to just do this. If to do this, it's such a difficult career. It's often financially unwise, and you have to be in it to really do it. And so, finding joy in the actual doing is I think quite important. But also, I want to do this for a living. So there's the whole, okay, what do I love and need to get on, and how do I need to make a living? Okay, I don't love this gig, but it's going to pay me really well, so I think I need to do it. It's constantly a balance of that. We're never going to get 100% if we want, and so we got to figure out how to sustain and make that living. But to me, success is just doing it. It's
Yeah.
I don't, but you also have to define it yourself. It's different for everyone. I mean, because sometimes it's not sustainable, and it's like, okay, all I need to really do is just 3 shows a year at a community theater, and that's good for me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's what it is for you.
Well, and I would actually argue, and I very much prescribe to this idea as well. So I would say all three of us, but certainly you and Shayna, for example, are artists who, this idea of just doing it, well, you got to do it. Meaning, if the idea of quote unquote doing it is the definition of success, then you and Chris might write a show. I mean, you put one foot in front of the other. Shayna's going to produce her own shows, write songs, start. You it has to be self-generative. I would argue to some extent, as opposed to going waiting for someone to go, okay, now I pick you. Because the truth is that there's so many elements of this business that want to see us out the door, not even consciously. There's just competition steep for us to continue to put one. There's going to be hills and valleys, but to continue to show up over and over again for ourselves, in a lot of ways. Do you feel like that is a true assessment of like you as just someone who like, I just keep doing it whether or not there's a big check coming in the door or not?
Yeah, I think self-generation is the key to this thing,
Mm.
because you have to keep working on your craft, and the best way to keep working on the craft is to keep stretching that muscle of writing. I'm using that. That's my story, right? I'm a writer, but like if you're an actor, you got to keep acting, and you got to figure out part of, I think, figuring out this industry is figuring out what you want to do and how that overlaps with the world at large right now, right? Like you got to read the room, so to speak. How are people getting successful? I mean, Shayna, I see you do so many gigs, and you are really good at posting about them. And so you're coming up, and I'm seeing you again and again. You're so good at getting your stuff out there. That's the environment we live in. You have to post about all your stuff right now, and that's okay. And there's a way to do it tastefully, and Shayna, you do it very tastefully.
Thank you. And I'm also single, so I'm trying to,
should we
put the
Michael, that's the first half of this episode when we were introducing you. It was very specific too. It was like, I'm good with a beard, and also I want them to be motivated. I mean, it was like literally a person's profile. So
perfect. Okay, cue the wedding bells, Shayna.
Yeah.
Michael, are you single?
I'm single.
So do you want to drop another personals ad here too?
Sure. I mean,
you may have more success on here than me on a musical theater podcast.
What are you saying? What does that mean?
Straight single.
I know what you mean. I mean, I'm single at Michael Kooman on the Insta handle. Check me out. Handle? My Grindr handle is gosh, I have so many answers to that question. I feel like I can't I'll tell you offline.
Yeah, let it be a surprise. Also, you don't want someone. There's gonna be thousands of people finding. I don't even know what that app looks like.
I don't think you can search people by their handle.
Okay.
I
don't know what's Grindr.
Yeah, right.
We'll sit you down sometime.
We'll tell you when you're older.
Never touch it. Don't go there. You don't need it.
I just had a brilliant.
It's the
question.
devil's app.
It is.
I'm leaving space, but I'm gonna.
Okay, no, I'm just curious. Like, I'm so excited for you and Chris, and Michael, you and I have gotten together and written some dirty stuff, and what do you want to see next? Or what kind of if someone were to come to you, a young, gorgeous Jewish woman would come to you and say I want you to write this type of project for me. What are you not seeing? Speaking of seeing how the industry works and knowing what you're doing, where do you see musical theater heading, and what do you really want to see, whether you're writing it or not?
I think I want to see I want to see people trying to include more. Something that I tried to do with The Break is I'm trying to write it musically and dramatically in a way that doesn't just speak to musical theater people, because I think sometimes we can get caught into a bit of a bubble, especially musically. There is so much music out there right now. It's so easy to find new music. Yeah. I say this as someone who just wrote Finn at the Kennedy Center, which is the most musical theater piece I've ever written. But I kind of want to see more than just musical theater as a way of musical theater, quote unquote, kind of music that is telling a story, because I think it can be distancing to non-musical theater people. And so again, it's sort of like the reading the room thing. What are people into right now, and where does my want or skill set overlap with that? I mean, into the earlier part of your question, I am so interested in telling individual people's stories. I think it's there's so many things to. The cool thing about this moment in time is that I think a lot of different kinds of stories are more acceptable, stories that haven't been told. And so I think if you have an interesting story, I'm interested in hearing it, and I'm interested in hearing something just unique and I just love talking and chatting with new people. Shayna, I don't know how much people know about this story that you were telling me that you want to write, but I think it's a brilliant idea for a musical, and it's your story, and I want to see it, maybe work on it if you want me to. I think it's Shayna, does everyone know what this is? Are we allowed to talk about it on this?
I can't even remember which one it was.
The Chatters.
So many.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Do you want to say it, or do you want to preserve it?
We should preserve it. I feel like it's such a good story that you need to write it. It's brilliant though. It's really brilliant.
Yeah, and maybe this is something can help me with both of you. I sat with a director friend. We met a couple times before I left to go back to Flint to do this show, and she kind of I was like, just ask me questions. And I started writing like what I'm going through or like what angle I want to go to, just brainstorming. And I was like, great. Once the show opens, I'm going to have so much time to write. And then every time I get back to it, I'm like, I don't know how to start this. Like, I don't know. The farther I get away from it, it was a job that I had for like a year and a half. And it was such a unique experience. And now I'm like, I don't really know how to start or how to talk about it. So it's kind of just, I'm so happy that you brought it up because it's just still kind of floating on like a Google Doc.
I think can I make a suggestion?
Please.
Well, first off, you should talk about it if you want to talk. I didn't mean to like back to my like shooting ideas down thing. Like, I'm sorry if I shot your idea. If you want to chat about it, you should chat about it. But here's my two thoughts is that one, I think sometimes a good goal is just to get something down. Like if you have 10 to 12 free to work, just be like, I need to have something down, whether it's music or lyrics by the end of this. I'm going to have a verse or a chorus, or I'm going to have a scene, and trust that your future self will edit it to make it better or throw it away if it's bad. But it's better to have something than nothing. And then I think another suggestion I would say is start with the thing that you know is going to be in the piece. You know, Chris and I usually start with the song that we know has to exist, that we're most excited about in a show, as a way of sort of trying out the world musically, trying out the characters. Start at the place that is the most exciting, or the place that the song that must be there.
Okay. That's really helpful for anyone listening who's like, how do I start on a new musical?
How do I start?
Mm-hmm.
Or just how do I start anything?
Yeah. How do I start anything?
Well, because I work, I know a lot of artists, as we both do, who have a lot of ideas, and that's sometimes the most difficult part, is just beginning, because we get overwhelmed by the scope of what could be, and then it's like, oh, can I really? And then next thing you know, it's been 4 years, as opposed to like, oh, well, let me just start with the thing that I know I would want to include: the scene, the song, the description, the whatever, you know, and see where it goes. And just to say something about when you were talking about the break, and I would love for you to maybe briefly just tell us what Finn and the break are about, since we keep talking about them. But, you know, I directed Hedwig and the Angry Inch 3 times, interestingly enough. And one of the things that Hedwig, every time people would come and say, you know, I've never been to a musical before, and I didn't know what to expect, and I just loved it. And I feel like what John Cameron Mitchell and Stephen Trask did all those years ago too was sort of, you know, a first of its kind in many ways, of breaking open our conceit of what musical theater is and can be, just to say. And I think, like, when I think, and the score for the break is so good as well. And there's that one, you know, number that people might know, Fucking Good, which is great. And Shayna,
So
you did sing the shit out of it, just to say.
Thank you.
But
It's
I
in
think
my
it's a good
book.
example of that.
It should be.
But Michael, tell us just briefly, like, give us like, what's Finn, what's the break, because we keep talking about them.
Sure. I mean, they're so different. I love that I get to introduce one after the other.
Yeah.
Break, which is the show that we all worked on, is a 2-person show. It's the story of high school sweethearts who have been dating for 10 years, and they decide before they get married, they're going to go on a 30-day sexual rumspringa free-for-all, sow their oats, and then get married. And of course, it goes hilariously off the rails from almost day one, and we follow their journey. And each actor plays everyone else that the other one has sex with. It's a rock musical, and yeah, we just wanted to write something fun and sexy. And we originally started, I'm sure I told you all of this, we originally started from a place of like, could we do a musical in like a rock venue? Like, what if a rock musical, what if a rock band show turned into a musical? Because I'm just trying to think outside of the box. I want to get other people interested in theater, and it became clear that we kind of needed to have a book. We needed, you know, actual like scenes and stuff like that. But that was the original conceit, and then we sort of edited it as we went on. But Finn, for a change of pace, is a family-friendly musical that just premiered at the Kennedy Center. I'm very proud of it, and it's the story of a shark growing up in a toxic masculine shark pack, who then discovers the very feminine world of fish and realizes that actually maybe he's a fish inside, not a shark, and he has to navigate that conversation with his shark pack. And of course, fish have a very anti-shark sentiment for some reasons that you might understand. And so it's a show that's actually quite joyous and fun and sparkly, and everyone learns a lesson, and it's a fun show.
So sweet.
Looking back at your work so far, is there anything like you're specific, like I'm super proud of this one? And are there any upcoming dream projects or even collaborations / tacking on the question? Do you and Chris write everything together, or do you sometimes write separately too?
We write separately too. I mean, I think that is the cool thing about collaboration, is like, what is the cool thing about you that brings out a different side of me, right? It's like just to relate this to relationships, again, on the Insta Reel thing, I saw someone say something that I thought really hit home with me, because, I'm dating now because I'm single, and think about the kind of person you are with that person, because that's the person you're going to be in a long-term relationship. It actually helped me say no to somebody very quickly, because I was like, he's bringing out a very different side of me. But it's the same thing with collaborators. Like, what do you bring out of me, and what can I bring out of you, and where do we sort of like hit really hard? Like, where is the meat, or the like the special sauce of our relationship? And I think different people can bring that out of you. And you asked, what am I proud of and what I want to write? I think I'm super proud of the Finn and proud of the Break, because they're just so different. They're so different. And I think what I'm, if I may say, most proud of is I feel like they're both just tight. They're like, the songs are there to tell the story, and it's a train that just starts, and you're just on this whole ride until it's over. Like, I feel like we wrote a really tight show in both of these cases. What do I want to see? What do I want to do? I want to try to do things that are like out of my comfort zone a little bit. Like, for example, in my head, I want to write like an electropop musical. Someday. I'm obsessed with sort of electropop. I sort of sometimes think about stories that I like, but more so when it comes to music, what kind of music have I not written yet that would be interesting and varied and vibrant enough to tell a story in the stage, is sort of something I think about. Yeah. Does that answer all the questions?
It does. I do want to say, I don't know anything about it besides reading a little bit in the videos I saw of Romantics Anonymous. But it looked beautiful and interesting, and reminded me of, oh gosh, what's that movie? What's that French movie?
Amelie?
It could be Amelie, but I was also, maybe I'm being really basic here, because it's about, I didn't think it had to do with like a chocolate.
Oh, chocolat.
Chocolat.
Oh.
But just like the magical world of it. And I mean, I don't know anything about it, but just some clips I saw in some really well created promo videos, but it looked beautiful and like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. That is a show I'm incredibly proud of. We're actually releasing an album in January of that show, which we were able to sort of work out. We had a tour planned in America that was going to open in Los Angeles March 24th, 2020. And that tour got yanked out of service, but it'll still live on in this live thing. I will say one thing that I learned, that I mean, working with Emma Rice, who is the director of that piece, she was the artistic director of the Globe, Shakespeare's Globe, and she taught me really how to be an expert collaborator. She changed me forever. A lot of the things I'm talking today about collaboration, I learned from her, just working with her and watching her. She is a genius. She is a genius of collaboration. She comes from a devised theater background, and she knows how to lead a room with heart, and she has great taste, and she gives you time to do your thing, and also comes in and helps you edit it at the right time as well. She is an expert at leading a group of artistic minded people, which is such a weird random skill that takes a lot of experience, but also a lot of heart and a lot of artistry. Working with Emma changed my life for sure in the way that I engaged with all of you in the break. She's just one of the most generous collaborators and leaders of a room full of artists. She's brilliant.
I like that we've somewhat inadvertently talked a lot about collaboration, and I'm curious, in either of your opinions, how can you actively become a better collaborator? Yes, to some of the things we're talking about in terms of just practices and like ideals that go along with good collaboration. But if I know that I'm not a great collaborator, how can are there resources, people, mentors, podcasts, books, things that could help me find my better version of myself?
Shayna, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think if someone is like, I'm a bad collaborator, feels like maybe they just don't want to. They like really just prefer working alone, really prefer having their ideas first a little bit. I mean, maybe this is an assumption, but I think everything, if you want to get better at it, like you have to have a certain awareness and inquiry within self. I know that sounds like very Deepak Chopra, but it's true. Like, if you want to be a better collaborator, first figuring out why do you feel like you're a bad collaborator? Did someone give you feedback? Do you get in fights in the room? Do people like just not want to work with you? Or does it feel like, do you walk away from working with someone or writing with someone? Do you just feel like icky or you feel like depleted? So I would say the first thing is self-inquiry. About why, and then it could also I would find that some of those answers are like, I just haven't really found someone that I really meld with and that feel really gets where I'm coming from. I think action, like jumping into working with someone, finding someone, just like if you want to find a partner, if you want to find a group of friends, or if you want to find some musicians, like through my band throughout the years, I have worked with, I'm not going to say gone through, but I've worked with so many different musicians and I've had some really disappointing gigs because it just wasn't working. Like the chemistry, which is something you can't really define or you can't really guess about, just the chemistry really wasn't working. And I'm trying to I listened to so many podcasts. I was trying to figure out if there was something but I do recommend the Nonviolent Communication book. That has helped me a lot with just like physical talking to people. But I think a lot of it is practice. A lot of it is figuring out who you are, what you like, how you like to work in general. Kind of what we were talking about earlier of like, how do you like to receive feedback? Like, I work really well in the morning and I'd prefer to like have all my creative stuff in the morning. And can you find someone like that? Or can you find someone who like is consistent and like is flexible when like you do reach out and they're like, yes, I do want to work together, I do want to write together, but then they're not really making the time, and every time you suggest something or every time you put something on the calendar, they move it or they have like prioritize something else. Like it's a lot of like, there's a huge web of options, but to me the most important thing is having a relationship with self and understanding what you really like, what you really want to work on, how you really like to work, and then trust that the people or the projects, like then the alignment comes in. Trust that you want to work with people that you are in most alignment with over like they have all these Tonys or all these Grammys or they've been in Broadway shows or whatever. It's like self-inquiry and alignment is my summary of it.
I totally agree with that. I think one thing I would add, I guess maybe two things. One thing I would add is, asking for feedback after it's over, or like through the process.
Yeah.
Like, hey, how was, we worked together for the first time today. How was that for you? Like, do you feel like I was too dominant? Did you feel like you were heard? Like, it's a thing. It's so tough to have the conversation. It's like, wow, I feel like like you just dealing with difficult things. I feel like you weren't. I don't know. I feel like we could have had a better show. If I don't know how you would handle that, Shayna, if you have a show where the musician isn't. It's one thing you can try to bring it up, and maybe it's a thing where it's like, this person's just not going to be in my group. I don't think we're vibing. But I definitely asked for feedback. Like, even Chris and I just now was like, how do you think this process went for Finn? I literally asked, how was my behavior? I was like, how do you think I did this? Like, I want to know, because it's,
That's great.
it's a thing that's like, I want to know because I want to be better at it. I mean, I also think getting feedback and giving feedback is just part of the process, but also, how do you grow if you're not getting feedback? So
Yeah.
the other thing I would say is, if you're sort of maybe on the younger side, or if you're starting out in the industry, I think trying to find a position where you're assisting somebody who is really good. Like, if you're assisting an amazing director, or if you're assisting an amazing choreographer, assisting a composer or something, seeing how they interact with their peers and really taking that in. I mean, again, just working with Emma Rice, I just think she is one of the most brilliant leaders of artistic people. She never says too much. She goes, can we make it a little faster here? You know what I mean? Like, just it's the smallest note that has the biggest impact. And she also understands the emotional intelligence and the general intelligence of everyone in the room, and knows how to give that person the feedback, knows that she has to tell this person they're doing a good job every day because they're very insecure. Like, there is an understanding that she has of leadership, that just being in the room and working with her, I will take to my grave. I love everything she taught me. And so I think assisting someone is a great way to see how they work and collaborate.
I'm excited. I want to meet this person. I want to meet this Emma Rice.
Where is
Emma
she
Rice
now?
is brilliant. So she was the artistic director of the Globe. She has her own theater called Wise Children in I forget where, but it's in London. I mean, she had a show on Broadway 10 years ago called Brief Encounter. I don't know if you guys remember that show.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant show.
I see the playbill. It was white and black. Yeah.
She's incredible.
Well, Michael, I as we were talking, I changed the title of this episode.
Oh, okay.
Because I loved this focus on collaboration. We talk a lot of, as we were briefly discussing before we hopped on, about this idea of sustainability and as an artist, and collaboration is at the core of what we do, one way or the other. And if we're looking to work consistently, if we're looking to find our own peace and happiness on our own journey as artists with ourselves and others, this is a core piece. So thank you for sharing so openly. We end, I didn't tell you this, but we end every episode with we call comfort food performances. And basically, we're each going to sing a 3-minute song. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
It basically features, it basically is just us naming like a favorite performance. The core conceit is that it's a performance you'd come back to over and over again. That's more Mike's idea. For me, it's really just a performance that I loved. So I'll kick it off only because it came up and I literally watched it last night. And I am going to say Kathleen Turner in Serial Mom, because it is that good. And if you guys get the chance to see it, you should totally catch it, because she's amazing and wild, and as you would expect her to be. A young Kathleen Turner in Serial Mom is my comfort food performance. Shayna?
And this is somebody else's performance, right? Not my own.
It could be your own. It's yet to happen, but I love it.
No, I would say like the entire cast of Arrested Development is my comfort performance. It's just so funny, and that's what I want to see more in musical theater, is like funny and characters, like truly full-fleshed characters that are completely different from each actor, where you're just like, you see them at the stage door and you're like, you just played that fucking person. That's crazy. So it just makes me giggle and feels really good to watch any actor in Arrested Development.
They are also good. Michael.
So I'm gonna completely change tactic here in what we're talking about. I'm sure you've all seen this, but there is an amazing video that I've watched hundreds of times. I think it was sort of a little bit viral like 10, 15 years ago. It's Callista Day, a gospel singer, who is just like, it's a video of her like after rehearsal, like obviously just like improvising. She has like this 5-octave range. She's just, I bet all of you have seen it before. But she just is improvising from her soul, and it's beautiful. And it's like the other like choir members are behind her being like, no, oh my God. They're like dying, and you hear them. So you know it's live. And she just sounds like $1 million, and it fills my heart. Like just these runs that she's just making up are virtuosic. And everyone should, let me try to.
She sings "Hear My Prayer."
Is that it?
Covered by, oh wait, Callie Day.
Callie Day. Her full name is Callista.
Okay. Callie Day at Brea College Festival. She's like singing in front of an organ.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
I'm gonna.
I think I have. If it's that one, I have seen that one.
We'll
it's
include
fierce.
this video
Hear My
in the
Prayer.
show notes.
Yeah, Hear My Prayer. Have you seen that one?
Yes. It's been a while, but yeah.
I mean, it's from years and years ago, but it's just freaking brilliant. Just take a listen.
So
Hear
good.
My Prayer, Callie Day. No, because I want to include it in the. Oh, I don't know if I've seen this video. But I will watch it, and we will include this in the show notes for sure.
I love that.
Another great one that is really inspiring to me at the moment is Wolfpack at Madison Square Garden.
I love them.
They're incredible, and this like live concert they did at Madison Square Garden I've watched it 1 million times too. It's also great.
I think my friend Jacob Jeffries is playing on that. He might be playing on the keys.
No way.
Yeah. They're so good. I've been fans of them for a really long time. I have a record, like a vinyl from them.
Wow.
And I think we already said it, but people can find you at Michael Kooman on the Instagram.
Yeah.
And michaelkooman.com.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're the
pleasure.
best.
I'll see you at opening night of the break on Broadway, okay?
Bring your tux.
Then thank you, Shayna. You're the best.
Thank you. I love you guys. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.